Here on the Schema Info tab, we can get information about the columns and their types. Let me click the button to step into this, and notice now that when I set up the data reader, this time I'm passing along a flag, command behavior.schema only. This tells the command that when it executes this reader, it shouldn't set it up to retrieve data. There's extra overhead involved in that. It just wants the schema. If we only want the schema, only ask for the schema. In this case, we'll iterate through all of the columns in the data reader, and for each column, we're going to add to a list box the name and the type by calling the getName method and the getDataTypeName method. You pass the ordinal of the column you're on, and it retrieves information about the column. So here, for example, we'll see for each column the name and the type. Notice that the type is a SQL Server specific type name. The .NET Framework knows about those things. If you were retrieving data from an Access database, an MDB file, you would get types that correspond to Access types. That allows the .NET Framework to give you information that's specific to the data source you're using. If you want just a table full of all the schema information, there is the getSchemaTable method. This is even easier. This code's really short. Once we've got that data reader in hand, again, using the schema only flag, we can call the getSchemaTable method. This returns back a data table. You can see that in this line of code. Now, of course, I could have just taken the results of calling getSchemaTable and assigned it into the data source property of my grid, rather than storing it temporarily into a variable. That didn't add anything, except it proved that the results of calling getSchemaTable really are a data table. Proved it here with the code. Given that data table, I can assign it as the data source of my grid. Now, of course, you might want to do something else with that data, like retrieve information about specific columns, and in that case, it would be useful to store it away into a data table variable. You see there's a column for column name, column ordinal, column size. Over here, you can tell whether a column allows nulls or not, as read-only, and so on. So you can then use the data in this data table to find out information about the schema of your data reader. We haven't talked much about iterating through or retrieving data from data tables. We will later on. Once you've learned those techniques, you'll be able to use them to retrieve information about the schema of your data reader.